EU leaders have rejected a plan to hold talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin. France and Germany made the proposal, but it got plenty of backlash from Baltic countries at a summit in Brussels. And there was another topic dividing member states: what to do about a new law in Hungary that critics say is homophobic. More than half of EU leaders condemned the legislation, calling it discrimination that goes against EU values. Well, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban says he has no intention of changing the law.
Rainbow-colored rage at what's seen as a Hungarian attack on fundamental rights stole the spotlight at a European Union summit that was to be dominated by efforts to deal with the coronavirus crisis and its economic consequences. As he arrived in Brussels, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban faced calls for his country's expulsion from the EU for a new law that bans any portrayal of homosexuality to minors. Many leaders confronted Orban directly in the meeting, some of them quite emotionally. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo says he was surprised by what he called the quasi-unanimous opposition.
We have clearly pointed out to Orban this is a line in the sand. You've gone too far and this law is unacceptable.
More than half of leaders signed a letter underscoring the EU principle of non-discrimination over sexual orientation and gender identity. The European Commission has already begun a legal procedure against Budapest over the legislation. Another departure from the planned agenda on Russian relations, a last-minute Franco-German proposal to invite Vladimir Putin to a summit. That suggestion failed to gain support, to the German Chancellor's chagrin.
We couldn't agree today to immediately meet at the high level, at the leaders' level. But for me, it's important that the format of a dialogue will be further investigated. I personally would have wished for a more courageous step, but it's good as it is.
Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda is also pleased with the outcome because the proposal failed.
I think it's too early because so far we don't see any radical changes of behavior, of pattern of behavior of Vladimir Putin. And to try to engage is, of course, a very good idea, but to engage without any red lines, without any preconditions, of course, it would be a very wrong signal, I would say.
Leaders did cover other subjects. On migration, they focused on how to stop it at its source. And on the coronavirus, they called for more solidarity and coordination on efforts to fight the pandemic and to reopen travel. Next up, prospects and programs for economic recovery.
Let's go right to Brussels. Our bureau chief, Alexandra Van Namen, is standing by for us there. Good morning, Alexandra. I want to ask you about the two big topics dividing member states. First of all, the question of a possible summit with Vladimir Putin. There was no agreement on this issue. Why is that?
Well, we have to understand, first of all, that this was a last-minute pitch by Germany and France, and that was presented shortly before the summit started. And many EU leaders felt blindsided, saying, why is it justified to have this idea right now, only because the US president met with Vladimir Putin? We have to understand that high-level talks between EU leaders and the Russian president were suspended after the annexation of Crimea. Since then, the relations got even worse. So that is why many EU leaders, among them many in Eastern Europe, are saying it's too early to talk about that. First, we have to see a change of behavior and concessions from the Kremlin.
OK, let's talk about the other topic, the LGBTQ law in Hungary that's very controversial. We know Viktor Orban is not backing down. EU leaders, many of them saying it is homophobic. And I want to play you what the Dutch Prime Minister had to say.
If you ask me, Hungary no longer has a place in the EU. But unfortunately, with the system we have, I can't, or the other 26 member states can't just tell them to leave. That needs to be done step by step. And in the meantime, we hope they'll adapt.
Alexander, that is a pretty bold statement from the Dutch Prime Minister that Hungary may not have a place in the EU anymore. So how is this issue going to play out?
Well, this is a very bold statement indeed, and I think it's fair to assume that other EU leaders were thinking the same when they had this heated, emotional discussion about a new law in Hungary. But we have to say that this is, of course, up to Hungary to decide whether they would like to stay in the European Union or not. And now, after this very heated summit, we are sort of, to speak, back to business. The European Commission has announced that it is triggering legal proceedings over this new legislation in Hungary. However, in the past, we also saw that Hungary tends to ignore court rulings. But there is a new mechanism, a new rule of law mechanism linked to EU funds. It's not in place at the moment, but it will be soon. So we definitely expect to see a decision by the European Commission to freeze EU funds being distributed to Hungary if there is a lack of democratic values in this country.
You called it a heated summit. I mean, what do these disagreements tell us about the state of unity in the European Union?
Well, I think it's telling us a lot about the problems and challenges the European Union is facing. It was meant to be a club of democracies, you know, a counter model to dictatorships and authoritarian regimes elsewhere, not within the bloc. And now the European Union is facing authoritarian tendencies within the club. And it's just the whole thing is telling us that the European Union is not well equipped to counter such authoritarian, undemocratic moves, measures within the European Union.
Okay, last question, Alexander. Considering those struggles, do you think there's any prospect of a concrete outcome on these topics?
Well, we actually have a few concrete outcomes. We have the decision to look into further punitive measures with regard to Russia. The European Union wants to work closely together with the countries who can help to stem migration. And the EU leaders are quite united when it comes to COVID and how to fight future pandemics.
Our Brussels Bureau Chief Alexander von Namen reporting for us there. Thank you very much.